All right, so just 2 days ago, the CEO of OpenAI, Sam Altman, testified in front of a Senate committee on basically AI dangers and potential regulation ideas to ensure that it's safe. And that's a whole huge host of issues that I'm not going to get into in this video. But what I wanted to zero in on is one particular part where Senator Blackburn, one of the members on the committee, asked Sam directly about music creation, because OpenAI had this product called, not really a product, but sort of a research project called Jukebox. Essentially, it was just like the Google Music LM model where you could have text to music input. You could ask it to create certain types of tracks and also mention certain artist names, and it would deliver you something that was similar to what you wanted. It was never made widely available. I think you had to sign up for some sort of a beta test for it. And I actually don't believe that it's even available anymore. So I think they took it offline. But what's starting to dawn on me as I'm hearing Sam's response to this, and we'll definitely play this back in just a second so you guys can hear it directly. And also what I saw recently with the release of the Google Music LM model and them letting you know that you cannot type in an artist name or ask for vocals in the tracks, it's starting to dawn on me that I think what potentially is happening, can't confirm it, of course, because I don't know for sure, but I think a lot of these companies that are creating AI-generated music models are training on copyrighted data. I think it's all signs are pointing that that's exactly what they're doing behind the scenes, and that's why they're not necessarily releasing these things openly and publicly, and certainly not charging for them. And I think it's also interesting, revealing why the Google Music LM has this part right here as you work with them. I want to start generating some music. It says certain queries that mention specific artists or include vocals will not be generated. So when I first saw this, I didn't really think about it. I was like, okay, I guess they just don't want to potentially commit copyright infringement. But I'm now thinking the reason for that might be, again, don't know for sure, but it might be that they did train off of copyrighted music, probably using Spotify. There's definitely a way for these companies to just literally go train off of all the music that's on Spotify, little snippets of it. I talked to an actual data scientist that confirmed that for me. I will release that interview on my channel soon, by the way. And I'm wondering if the reason why they're sort of blocking all the names of artists or mentions of artists is because if I went in here and said, make me a pop punk song in the style of Blink-182, and it popped out a song just like a Blink-182 record, well, Blink-182 and their record label and their publisher are going to be pretty curious about how did it know that? How does it know what our music sounds like? How is it able to generate off that? Where did it train that data? So I think this is one way for Google to kind of, cover themselves and not be legally liable. That might be what's happening. It also could be that they just want to be very, very safe, and so maybe they didn't train on copyrighted data, and they're just wanting to make sure that they're staying as far away from that as they possibly can. That's also a possibility. I want to make sure that I'm not accusing people of doing things when I don't actually know what they're doing. But let's take a listen to this interchange between Blackburn and Altman, and you let me know what you think in the comments below. I'll let you know what I think in terms of what is being said, and also pay attention as we go through this, what is not being said. I think that's actually more revealing.
And I'm concerned about OpenAI's Jukebox. It offers some re-renditions in the style of Garth Brooks, which suggests that OpenAI is trained on Garth Brooks songs. I went in this weekend and I said, write me a song that sounds like Garth Brooks, and it gave me a different version of Simple Man. So it's interesting that it would do that, but you're training it on these copyrighted songs, these MIDI files, these sound technologies. So as you do this, who owns the rights to that AI-generated material? And using your technology, could I remake a song, insert content from my favorite artist, and then own the creative rights to that song?
Thank you, Senator. This is an area of great interest to us. I would say, first of all, we think that creators deserve control over how their creations are used and what happens sort of beyond the point of them releasing it into the world. Second,
remember that point where he says it's important for creators to have control over what happens to their creations once they're released into the public, which would include whether or not an AI model should be allowed to train off of it. Just remember that.
I think that we need to figure out new ways with this new technology that creators can win, succeed, have a vibrant life, and I'm optimistic that this will present.
Then let me ask you this: how do you compensate the artist?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Okay.
We're working with artists now, visual artists, musicians, to figure out what people want. There's a lot of different opinions, unfortunately, and at some point we'll have to.
Let me ask you this: do you favor
First of all, too, a lot of different opinions about being compensated. I'm not seeing much more than probably creators saying, let us opt in, opt out, right? That's probably what every visual artist and musician and record label is saying. You just give it, first of all, let us decide if you're going to use use our copyrighted model or content to train your AI models. That's what I think what everybody wants. Everybody definitely wants to get paid if they say yes. So if we say, sure, go ahead and use my music to train your AI model, we feel that there should be at least a one-time fee for that. And then whether or not there can be a sort of a back-end royalty structure or sort of a shared ownership of an AI model where you get a percentage of the kind of music that gets generated, or if it's monetized, you sort of get a percentage of that. I think all creators are probably interested in that. So this idea that there's all these confusing opinions about how do people get compensated, I don't know if I necessarily buy that. To me, at least from my deep dive into this world, even with the creative artists, I think that's kind of what everybody wants. Now, how much? That could be debatable, of course. Artists are going to want way more than these AI companies are going to be able to want to give out. But I, in terms of like all these different models for how things can be compensated, I'm not really buying that. I think it's pretty clear what content creators want in this scenario.
Something like Sound Exchange that has worked in the area of radio.
I'm not familiar with Sound Exchange, I'm sorry.
Streaming. Okay.
That was a little disheartening when I saw that part. Blackburn's talking about Sound Exchange, and she might have just misspoke. She said it was like a radio tracking service that pays musicians. Satellite radio for sure, taps into this, or Sound Exchange taps into the satellite radio market. But really, Sound Exchange was established for internet streaming, for Spotify, for all those kind of streaming services, Pandora, that kind of thing. And then Sam kind of chimes in and says, I've never heard of Sound Exchange. So also a little bit disheartening because he said in the beginning that this is an area of great interest for him and his team, how to compensate artists for their music. And he's never heard of the company Sound Exchange. He's never even heard those words before. Hopefully, it's disheartening, but it's like, hey, at least maybe this is a point for him to get himself a little bit better educated, have his team help him understand, or have them go get educated on, whether or not Sound Exchange is the right vehicle for getting artists compensated for AI models. I don't know. It might not be, but you should at least be aware of what are the current models that artists do get compensated for. That would be certainly helpful right now.
You've got your team behind you. Get back to me on that. That would be a third-party entity.
Okay.
So let's discuss that. Let me move on. Can you commit, as you've done with consumer data,
This is very important. Pay attention.
not to train ChatGPT, OpenAI, Jukebox, or other AI models on artists and songwriters' copyrighted works, or use their voices and their likenesses without first receiving their consent?
So first of all, Jukebox is not a product we offer. That was a research release, but it's not, unlike ChatGPT or DALL-E.
But we've lived through Napster.
Yes.
That was something that really cost a lot of artists a lot of money.
So I want to just summarize real quick before we continue on. She basically said, are you going to commit moving forward to no longer use copyrighted data, and she's including music in her question, to train your AI models? And his response initially was, well, Jukebox wasn't really a big commercial release. Not a lot of people used it. We didn't make money off of it. It was just basically a little research project. It wasn't a big deal. But let's just keep going.
Oh, I understand. Yeah, for sure.
The digital distribution era.
I don't know the numbers on Jukebox on the top of my head as a research release. I can follow up with your office, but it's not, Jukebox is not something that gets much attention or usage. It was put out to show that something's possible.
Well, Senator Durbin just...
So right there. So he's saying Jukebox basically didn't get a lot of attention. People didn't use it a lot. It was just us seeing if we could use music, train an AI model, and have it generate original new music off of that music. So he's basically saying it's no big deal. Not a lot of artists got harmed from that, and it wasn't even publicly available. There weren't a lot of people even using it, which is not what she asked. Okay, I want to make sure that I noticed this in the exchange. That she said, are you going to vow to not use copyrighted data? And instead of him saying, absolutely, we are going to abide by every law. We're going to do our best to go out to copyright owners and artists and get their opt-in consent to this and compensate them and all that kind of stuff. He didn't say that. He just said basically, Jukebox wasn't really a big deal. Wasn't very commercial, kind of a research project. So a little bit of a problem for me, at least.
Said, and I think it's a fair warning to you all. If we're not involved in this from the get-go, and you all already are a long way down the path on this, but if we don't step in, then this gets away from you. So are you working with the Copyright Office? Are you considering protections for content generators and creators in generative AI?
Yes, we are absolutely engaged on that. Again, to reiterate my earlier point, we think that content creators, content owners need to benefit from this technology. Exactly what the economic model is, we're still talking to artists and content owners about what they want. I think there's a lot of ways this can happen, but very clearly, no matter what the law is, the right thing to do is to make sure people get significant upside benefit from this new technology, and we believe that it's really going to deliver that, but that content owners, likenesses, people totally deserve control over how that's used and to benefit from it.
Okay, so on privacy then, how do you plan to account for the collection of voice and other user-specific data, things that are copyrighted, user-specific data through your AI applications? Because if I can go in and say, write me a song that sounds like Garth Brooks, and it takes part of an existing song, there has to be a compensation to that artist for that utilization and that use. If it was radio play, it would be there. If it was streaming, it would be there. So if you're going to do that, what is your policy for making certain you're accounting for that and you're protecting that individual's right to privacy and their right to secure that data and that created work?
So a few thoughts about this. Number one, we think that people should be able to say, I don't want my personal data trained on. I think that's
right. That gets to a national privacy law.
Okay, I agree. Everybody agrees, right? The problem is, and especially when Sam said that in the beginning, remember I told you to remember, he said it's very important that artists have that consent to decide whether or not their data is trained on. OpenAI didn't follow that ethic or that rule. I don't think. I don't know for sure, but I think all signs, because he's not saying, oh, we didn't train on copyrighted data and we'll vow not to do it in the future. He's staying away from those sort of absolutes. And he's kind of just saying more about like his philosophical beliefs about, oh, we definitely feel that artists should be compensated and we feel they should be a part of this. So when they trained Jukebox on whatever they trained it on, it doesn't seem like they went to any artist and said, do you mind if we train on your data? So it is one of these things where, I don't hate Sam. I don't think he's a bad guy or anything like that. I think of it as an opportunity for us, musicians and music creators, to become aware of this stuff early on, because luckily we're kind of wrapping our heads around this before these models become mainstream, before they're released to just like 13-year-olds that can type in whatever they want to and create music to throw up on Spotify, right? So, these companies essentially, I think what they're all doing, Google, OpenAI, is they're just kind of testing to see what can be done because they're sort of under the radar and there's not a lot of scrutiny, public scrutiny for what they're doing. They're able to train all their models basically behind the scenes, probably, again, not for sure, probably on copyrighted music. Now, what I think will happen in the future is when these models are potentially released for commercial release or just publicly available for anybody to come in and create some music that's decent and could potentially be competitive with the artist music that it trained upon, I think what we're going to look at is some sort of like you have to show your work essentially. Like a lot of these companies are going to have to open up the black box of their AI models, their neural networks, and say, what data was used here? You have to basically have an audit and let computer scientists and people who understand that stuff and coders go into the data and see what was actually used, what was trained, and also that company is going to have to produce, I believe, licensing agreements, essentially, opt-in agreements that say these are the artists that we trained on. Here's the agreements from their record labels, from their publishers, saying yes, you can absolutely use our content. So I think that's probably what we're going to face in the future here. But I just want to finish up his answer here. It was unfortunate, basically, the time ran out and you couldn't answer her question.
Which many of us here on the dais are working toward getting something that we can use.
Yeah, I think strong privacy.
My time's expired. Let me yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, so it basically ended there. So he didn't even get to, if he was going to sort of answer her question, which is essentially, how are you going to ensure that you're not just taking music, from unauthorized sources and training off of it? So again, didn't get a direct answer from him. I saw a little bit of this kind of like he was getting a direct question in terms of, are you going to commit to not use copyrighted music in the future? And instead of him answering that, he sort of came over here and said, Jukebox wasn't a big deal. It was a tiny little thing. It's not Napster. It wasn't threatening anybody's income. So it's like kind of irrelevant, though. My opinion is that it's irrelevant whether or not you made money off of it or not. The point is that this is people's livelihoods, right? This is their art. This is their music. This is like what they've created their entire lives on, their income on. And even if you didn't, and that's not what the copyright laws that we have right now even require, that you have to sort of make money to commit copyright infringement. Making money is one of the elements, but it's not the only element. So I just see this as us, I'm frustrated obviously with a bit of this conversation going on here and the lack of forthrightness coming from Sam and companies like Google and all that kind of stuff. But I see it as sort of an opportunity for us to be ahead of the curve a little bit here, to sort of just open our eyes to this and start to ask these kind of really tough questions to these companies, and not just sort of go along with this, philosophical, lofty, hey, we want all artists to be compensated. We feel like they should be a part of this. It's like, okay, great. You didn't do that though already. You've already shown us with your actions, words are cheap, but actions kind of say everything. Your actions in the past have shown that that's not really where your values are at. Your values were just in, can we do this, right? And if nobody's really looking that closely, can we get away with it? Now that more attention's on these companies, I think now they're having to get a little bit more serious about, oh, okay, now we really need to make sure that we are sort of, thinking seriously about compensating artists. So, and that comes from us, the music creators in all different types of the music industry, to really put the pressure back on these companies. So I see it as a good thing. I think in the long run, we are going to find a way to partner with these AI companies, the content creators, artists, visual artists, and AI models. We will be able to, I think, find a way to mutually benefit off of them. We're just sort of in the Wild West right now, where we didn't know this was a possible technology. It's now just a possible technology. So we need to make sure that we kind of show up here, right? And start to be a part of this conversation, and not just hold back and just hope that something happens and somehow we're kind of cut in on it. But it's up to us too, music creators, to kind of put pressure on these companies and start having these kind of conversations. So that's what this video was about. It was not meant to be like, negative Nancy or overly critical, but just to kind of point you guys into what I'm seeing happening here, and sort of, I think, laying out the landscape of where we are in terms of this brand new huge industry that's basically going to be unfolding in our lives in the near future. But let me know below, what do you guys think? Did you think that I had an accurate take on what Sam was doing there with his answers? Maybe I missed something. I want to know what you guys think. Post your comment below.